We're really excited to be doing this afternoon. It's the first of 3 webinars. The reason we wanted to do this Prepster and THT was because we recognise that in the current lockdown crisis, sorry, the COVID-19 crisis and the current lockdown, that we are all facing increased stress. There's more anxiety, there's a lack or misinformation. Some of us might be getting texts or letters from government around work, around money and security. And all of that has left us with a heightened sense of stress. It's also harder for us as people with HIV to access clinical and community services, or even access our peers. And there may be concerns around medication, around treatment, around a whole host of things. So what we wanted to do was to bring us together as a collective with professionals and experts and peers to talk about some of the key issues that we might be facing in a safe setting. We recognise it was really important for people with HIV to connect, to get practical tips to manage our health and our well-being during this crisis. We're all managing this really differently, and we'll all have different situations and different ways of managing our own situations as a result. So we hope that today isn't a definitive answer. We hope that we're giving you some really useful information. We hope that our experts will be helpful, but we also hope that you in the conversation, in the chat room, will offer your own answers, support, and suggestions for other people on the webinar today. As I said, this is the first of 3. We'll be doing 2 more webinars after today. The next will be on the 30th of April at the same time, 3 p.m. And that's going to be looking at staying safe during the lockdown of COVID-19. We've seen a huge increase in domestic violence. People with HIV face increased levels of stigma and might be living in unsafe situations. So we've got some really exciting, interesting colleagues who will be talking about those issues and how we can stay safe. Then on the 7th of May, our final webinar will be looking at how we can access community and clinical services, how we might access peer support, and also to give us a COVID-19 update. So you might recall we did an update just before the lockdown with THT and Prepster. Things have changed slightly, so we'll be giving you updated information in May. So on to the presentations and what we're going to be doing this afternoon. We have 3 great speakers today. Each are going to talk for about 7 to 10 minutes at a time on their particular topic. We'll ask that you post your comments and your questions in the chat room, and we'll be able to see, everybody will be able to see your questions in your posts. We'd like you to imagine this is a real group and you are in the real world. So please be respectful of each other, be respectful of the space. As you put your questions in, we'll be reviewing those and Dominic will be fielding them as they come in. At the end of each presentation, we'll put your questions to the speakers. We will attempt to answer as many questions as we can. We will group them where we can. And if they've been covered in the presentation, then we probably won't answer them. But please bear with us. We only have an hour and a bit, so we'll do the best that we can to answer as many questions as we can. Just want to acknowledge as well that all three of our speakers today are cisgendered men. And our next panel is going to be much more mixed. So we want to acknowledge that there is a slight gender imbalance on our panel today, but we hope that we'll be able to reflect all of our community who are living with HIV, regardless of our gender identity or our sexuality. So I hope you enjoy what we've got to offer for you today. Please participate. This is your webinar as much as ours, and we learn from each other. So with that, we'll kick off. So I'd like to introduce our speakers today. We have Maurits, Declan, and Andre. And they're going to be talking to us about 3 very key areas which we think are important. Maurits is going to be talking about routine and coaching. Declan's going to be talking about physical activity. And Andre is going to be talking about emotional well-being and some mindfulness. But before I hand over, and to just kind of bring us all into the space, I just want to ask our 3 presenters just a quick question, and I'll ask you each. I'll start with you, Maurits, and then Declan, and then Andre. Can you tell me, has COVID-19 had an impact on you? For example, your routine, your mind, has it given you a new outlook or maybe a new hobby or habit? I'll go to Maurits first.
Yeah, I mean, it has had multiple impacts. Emotionally, that changes from day to day. And 3 weeks ago, it was a lot different from what it is now. So in that sense, I had to adjust, dealing with the uncertainty that we face. Yes, I've changed my routine. And I've also given a sort of a theme to this whole lockdown, is that I'm going to make it a time that I'll be longing back for when things are more or less back to normal. So, and that reflects in what I want is healthy living, which is a good thing. So I'm trying to bring a silver lining to it that way. But yeah, it had a huge impact, and it still has, but I'm coping.
Okay, thanks, Maurits. Declan, what about you?
Yes, it has definitely affected my routine. It's definitely affected my physical activity levels. Don't forget, I work at the YMCA in central London. So I do some type of workout most days of the week, and I swim almost every day. But yeah, I've sort of, as soon as this happened, I made a pact with myself that I wasn't going to let it beat me. So I have really worked on doing other things. As much as I hate running, I find myself doing interval training sometimes. So I have started running a little bit more. Not all the time. I do a run for 2 minutes and then a walk for 2 minutes, but I'm getting there. But yeah, just trying to stay mindful that we will get out of this, and I want to still be reasonably fit and healthy on the other side.
Right. Thank you so much. And Andre, what about yourself?
Well, if anyone knows anything about astrology, I'm a Taurian, and Taurians are famous for our slave-like devotion to routine. We thrive on it. So having mine upset has really had an impact on me. In fact, it's felt like a sort of spanner's been thrown into the works, you know, and I found it a little bit disorientating to begin with. All my normal sort of rituals sort of just fell out of their formerly allotted slots. And suddenly there's no more going to the gym before work, no more getting on the train to go to work, no more lunchtime, no more after work stuff. So it was all spinning around, and it's quite a challenge to have to find ways to reincorporate those routines and invent new routines, perhaps, in the light of the situation. Mentally, I think as the severity of this situation began to impact and dawn on me personally, I noticed my mind began to fill with worries. Something I've learned, you know, we are all so similar as human beings, even though we're experts, we're all prone to the impact of this. I'm someone who sleeps very well at night. I found myself lying in bed, going through all the what if questions. What if I get it? What if something happens to my mother? What about my job? Is the world economy going to crash? Are we going to survive? Is it Armageddon? And you go to bed with this stuff and you wake up with it. So I've had to sort of take myself in hand in a way, you know, and just re-look at things. But this slowdown has afforded us that time of reflection and to think about how we might do things very differently. And I'll just finish quickly also by saying, in terms of what's different, I think it's helped me really reappreciate the very essential goodness of people, the way that individuals, communities and organizations have responded to this situation, and the sheer level of willingness of people who want to support and help, I found to be really inspiring. So it's kind of made me reappreciate us as a collective of people, you know, because we're pretty good.
Brilliant, thank you. I mean, that's really, really nice way to wrap that up, because we are a collective, and we're a collective here today. And it's really good to hear you talk about routines. I know Maurits is going to talk about that in a moment. So before we go over to Maurits, just 2 quick points. You will see at the bottom of your screens, wherever you are, you will have a chat function. If you open that at any point, we will be populating that with links, useful information, and references that our speakers will be presenting today. Now, we've done a test on this, and we're pretty sure you're not able to click directly from the links that we post. So you can do 2 things. You can cut and paste them and put them into your own documents and then follow them later. Or we are going to be exploring, putting together a resource list. If you would like that, we'll give you details of how you can get hold of the resource list at the end.
Okay, so we have a poll here. I'm going to launch it now. So have you changed your routine as a result of the lockdown? Okay, so pretty much everybody has voted on that. We've got 100% on that. So there you go, Maurits, take that away.
Yeah, I mean, that's encouraging. That's encouraging, because I do. Listen, thanks, first of all, Jim and Marc, for inviting me, and it's nice to be here. It's sort of funny to be talking about routine so prominently today, because I'm originally a health psychologist, and for many, many years. And it was about 20 years ago that I started indeed to work with people living with HIV. And that was in a time that when treatment only just became available, and there was excitement about that, but also a lot of reluctance, and you know, there was a lot of unknown around how effective treatment would be. And certainly no one had an idea that it would be as successful as we know it is now. But more importantly, then 20 years ago, there were many people who we now consider to be long-term diagnosed. It's a term that's also slowly but surely fading, but it's still there. And those people were people who for a long time thought that we're not going to survive. And then all of a sudden had to get used to the idea that they could actually live much longer than they ever thought. And more importantly, we're facing the question, now, how am I going to deal with that? How am I going to make sense of life? And with such a different outlook? Well, one of the most important things in health psychology and chronic illness is that we help people developing a routine. Now, that sounds like, yeah, sure. But look, one of the first things that we feel challenged in when shocking things happen or unexpected things happen is our routine. It is almost as if we've lost our old routine and that we are forced to face a new reality and developing a new one. Now, why is that so incredibly important? In fact, a routine is not only one of the backbones in practicing psychology, but it is indeed a backbone in everyone's life. And if only we all saw routine as such an important backbone, then that would help a lot. Routine is important because, first of all, it helps us develop good and healthy habits. A routine is, in fact, a glorified habit. It is a habit on a high level. And it also helps us to achieve certain goals, which is also important if we want to make more sense of life and if we want to have a sense of direction. In addition to that, a routine helps us give us a degree of security and a great deal of purpose. So a routine could be there for the morning, it could also be there for the day, it could be there for the week or the month or your entire life. And another thing that research has shown, that the more well thought through our routine is, and it requires good thought, it requires to be aligned with what we want to achieve and to be aligned with what our values are and also aligned with what we're good at. So a good thought through routine helps reduce stress levels. And also, Andre, it will help us sleep better. And it is a really important tool in also that. And then the last thing, there's a really nice altruistic thing about routine, is that once we've been able to change a routine into something that makes us fulfilled or makes us happier or more purposeful, is that we can teach it to others, that we can help other people change that too. Because for many people, it's maybe a desire to change routine, but it's not always easy because we need discipline and some rigor to pull that off. Now, perhaps in times like this, the lockdown, our lack of future orientation, I mean, no one is really able to make plans. A routine is also good because when we've implemented that and when it works, we also know what to expect. Now, knowing what to expect is perhaps one of the most useful tools in a world that right now is defined by uncertainty. I mean, no one knows what the world is going to look like next week or next month. We heard last night indications of the government that this might well last well into the year. Well, so all the more reason that if we stick to our routine and if we're articulate about what that should look like, then that will help us manage the uncertainty that we deal with. So it's important now, it's important actually all the time, but perhaps now more than ever. And that brings me to where routine is also important and needs to be reconsidered, is that we're all overnight started to work from home. Now, the working from home is a huge and interesting experiment. I would say that the working from home is the largest scale experiment in occupational psychology that we've ever seen, because that will probably change a lot. First of all, it's a great way, an opportunity to learn about ourselves, and but also our relationship to work and our relationship to being productive and engaged with our work. Now, where routine is important in this is that we have no boundaries anymore, or our boundaries have changed. Work-life balance used to be something in favor of life. We would pay attention to work-life balance because we wanted to have time for other things than work. But right now, work has invaded our private life entirely. It has invaded our psychological private life, but also our physical private life. So we have to develop a new routine to respect boundaries, to make sure that we are able to prioritize the right things in work. So that is important. Now, working from home before the lockdown was largely seen as a nice guilty pleasure. You could sleep in a bit longer because there wasn't any commute. You wouldn't get dressed or not take a shower, and you could just get on with stuff, not be interrupted and by anyone from work. And it would be a great opportunity to get things done whilst being able to do whatever you wanted to do in your home. Now, right now, we probably need to come to a new definition of work-life balance. And so in what I said before, what are the boundaries? How do we go about that? What would we like it to be like? So some people decide, like, and I'm one of them, every morning I'll get up at the same time and I'll make sure that I've been out. So when I've left the house, I've left the house. And when I walk back, with the help of a dog, and when I walk back, I'll go back to work. So I have made playfully a distinction between my private life and my working life. And then at the end of the day, I'll do the same in order to be able to walk back to home. And that gives me a different sense of focus and a different perspective. So that is something we all have to reconsider in function of what works for us and what suits us well. But again, routine is vital to an effective day and an efficient day at work. But there's another really interesting thing around psychology and work and the enjoyment of it in what we do right now. Because the work from home situation can actually make that we feel that we have more autonomy in what we do, and that we have a higher degree of self-governance. Now, interestingly, research shows that when we feel more autonomous in work, we enjoy work more. And when we are more autonomous in work, we feel that we're micromanaged much less. So this is a perfect opportunity to see how that works for us. Are you someone that would be motivated by more autonomy, or are you someone who needs a much more stricter motivation in order to get on with stuff? But there is a positive correlation between enjoying your job and having more independence or autonomy. And that means that we can learn to take more decisions for ourselves, that we can perhaps show a little bit more audacity in what we allow ourselves to do in work and what we allow ourselves to achieve, which is, again, an interesting experiment. And I'm sure that we haven't seen the last of that also after the lockdown. We probably come to some good insights. And that brings me to the last bit that I wanted to discuss you. Apart from routine and work from home and how we can learn about ourselves there, is about raising self-awareness. Socrates, the philosopher, said, look, know thyself is perhaps the most important thing, most important pursuit for any man or woman in life. And I think that's true. Now, this lockdown, where we socialize a lot less, where we are a lot in our own company, which for some people can be really easy, and for some people is more challenging, but it is a good opportunity to be self-reflective and to ask ourselves a number of questions about this lockdown and what it has done to us. And that self-reflection is incredibly rewarding. So I have put on a link, or I've asked Marc to do so, to my colleague Fiona Buckland. I didn't want to take the credit for this myself because she has made on her website a great list with questions that we can ask ourselves that takes half an hour to go through those questions, and that are in a way not only helpful in giving us insights in how we're dealing with all this, but are also soothing. They're also really, really helpful. And I've put that link up there, as well as a link to an interview that I just gave recently around work from home and why that is so important psychologically, where you can see a little and read a little bit more about what I now had to squeeze in 8 minutes. So that's what I wanted to say. Have I done well in 8 minutes or not?
I'm mute. You've done incredibly well. Thank you. And you're bang on time as well.
That's my only indication of doing well is being on time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Dom, do we have any questions?
Not that have come through yet. So we'll keep you posted on that. There may be some, I guess, coming through later on.
So anyway, I just wanted to reiterate that really it's an incredibly rewarding exercise to go through that list of questions on the website of Fiona Buckland. She is a marvelous life coach in East London and a good friend of mine, and it will help a great deal.
Thank you, Maurits. Great. Okay, Jim, over to you. You've got another poll for us.
I have. I'm going to be your glamorous assistant and relaunch this poll. So here we go. Have you become less physically active as a result of the lockdown? This one is a bit more split.
Wow.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay. So I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So that's 50-50.
Oh, wow. Amazing. So I'd like to hand over to Declan, who is from the YMCA, the Positive Health Scheme at Great Russell Street in London. Declan, over to you, and you're going to talk us about physical activity in this time.
Yes, I get the meaty one clearly to speak about 50-50. That's interesting. Yeah, so thank you very much. So yeah, I'm Declan from Central YMCA in London. Thank you for inviting me to come to the webinar today. It's really nice to be here. Yeah, so I manage the Positive Health Exercise Referral Scheme that's been running at the club for about 24 years now. And so, yeah, this has obviously been a game changer in terms of, you know, just having people coming through the program and trying to get them to move more, to suddenly not having any real contact with them anymore. So I think so I've been staying in contact with the Positive Health Club members, and what we've done is to keep engaged with them and to try and get them to keep moving and keep physically active is we've moved a lot of our sessions online now. So I have sent the links over to Marc, which he'll share at some point. So I think, yeah, so we've moved some of the sessions over to our YouTube channel, and I've been teaching on those. And I'm conscious that a lot of people at the moment are not really motivated to do, especially if you're on your own at home, not really motivated to do a lot, like an hour's workout. So I'm trying to keep the workouts reasonably short. Some are 15 minutes, some are 20 minutes, some are 30 minutes, and some are longer. And then we've also been doing some Facebook Live classes. So if you are on Facebook, we've been running sort of more, I guess, high intensity classes, but also with some yoga and supple strength as well, Monday to Sunday, and that's 3 days a week now. There's a morning class, a lunchtime class, and an evening class to try and keep all our members engaged with us as much as possible. So that's kind of where we are at the moment as a charity and as a club and as a health club, really, just trying to keep people moving so that as we spoke, as Maurits said earlier, our routine's gone out the window in terms of what we do on in terms of our physical health on a day-to-day basis. I work in the club, so I'm always doing something. If I'm not teaching a class, I'm doing something physical, or I'm swimming. And so the challenge when this all kind of started to happen was I do love routine. It was important that I tried to find somewhere in this new routine that I did some form of physical activity. And, you know, I think what I've discovered about being kind of in this situation, this lockdown situation, is I'm less inclined to do a full hour workout, but I'm more inclined to do a 20-minute or a 30-minute workout of some type. So it's been interesting because I've been going on a lot of studio channels as well as going on the YMCA channels and just having a look at what's out there. And I have found some really good online teachers. And I think that's important as well in this current situation. When you're in a live class, often people will go to that class because they like the teacher. You know, you hear people talking in the changing room, oh, they were great, that was a great session today. So for me, it's just been about finding those teachers that I can, you know, really connect with. And you know, I find watching them, your mind almost blocks out where you are and you just do the movements and do what you need to do. So I would say that's important, is do some shopping if you can. Go online, look, some YouTube channels are a little bit dodgy, but some are really good. Hopefully the YMCA ones you will enjoy if you go and click on the links. I do teach Zumba, so if you fancy a 15-minute boogie around the kitchen, feel free. It's hilarious, to be honest with you. It's also, as a teacher, that's been hard for me to suddenly be in front of a camera. I cannot tell you how weird it's been to suddenly be filming myself and without people in front of me. So that's also been a learning curve. So that's kind of for me how I've been managing it, is just finding sort of sessions that I can do almost on a daily basis. And I will do things like the things I've never really tried a lot before. So I'll do meditation now. And I never really did meditation before, but I'm doing meditation at least once a week. I'm doing yoga twice a week, and then I'm doing a couple of strength training sessions, but kind of short ones. So, and what I'm also doing is if I'm feeling inclined, and again, it's not about putting pressure on yourself, but rather just kind of putting it into your routine and aiming to try and get that session done, is sometimes I'll do a session in the morning for about 30 minutes to 45 minutes. And then I might, if I do incline, do another one in the evening. You know, and that way I'm sort of splitting up my workout routine a little bit, you know. So it's sometimes just the most important thing during this time that anyone can do, irrespective of your fitness level, of your age, of anything, is just keep moving, doing something, and incorporate it into anything. You know, God, when you're making the bed, you can do some squats as you're making the bed. That's a workout in itself. You know, when you're in the kitchen cooking, do some lunges as you're leaning down to get something from a cupboard at the lower bottom. So it's all about just making it sort of, rather than making it a chore, just making it fun. And we can't at the moment go to a gym and do our usual 45-minute class or an hour class, or we can't go and have a swim and do our 50 lengths or our 30 lengths or 100 lengths. But, you know, there will be a time when we will be able to do that. So it's important that we keep moving in some shape, size, or form. A lot of emails I've had from a lot of the club members. So I also manage the older adults program as well as positive health. And I've been emailing newsletters and tips for staying active and just general kind of keeping in touch with people as much as I can. Because I'm conscious that a lot of people are living on their own and maybe socially isolated. So I'm trying to do a once a week email. But I have also had questions about, well, you know, how much should I be doing? So, you know, the public health guidelines state that you should be doing at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity a week, or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity activity a week. Now, vigorous activity is usually when you're going for a run. But obviously not everyone at the moment can actually leave their house, because there are a lot of people who are in this 12-week lockdown who've got underlying health conditions, you know, like asthma or diabetes, and those who are HIV positive will have those secondary conditions. So it's important that, you know, as I said earlier, that you find some stuff online that you can do. But for those who can go out for their once-a-day walk or their run, you know, which I'm very lucky and I'm allowed to do, again, I will try and incorporate. Sometimes I just like to go for a walk, and I don't necessarily want to do anything too vigorous. I don't even want to do my sort of, you know, walk, run or anything like that. And that's absolutely fine. It's just about, you know, keeping moving and, you know, and again, listening to your body. And I think moving on into the next thing is, if you've got injuries, like a knee injury, a hip injury, an old shoulder injury, be mindful when you go and look on some of the, you know, some of the content online out there, that, you know, because a good instructor will always give you modifications or alternatives to do in a session. So if you're doing, for example, a high intensity type session, then it's important that that instructor does make that clear, that you can modify it, you can make it lower so that you can still do some of the exercises. And yeah, I mean, I think, again, it's just about doing whatever suits you. You know, that 150 minutes, you could almost just do 30 minutes each day, or you could do a rest day in between, you know, where you just relax and do nothing. Because don't forget, it's on your rest days that your body actually kind of, A, heals itself, and B, the muscles tend to grow, the joints recover from what you've done the previous day. So having a rest day is absolutely fine. So yeah, I think that probably for me covers pretty much everything I wanted to say. So thank you very much again. I have sent some other links down which will be shared, and yeah, any questions, let me know. Thank you. Is that all right?
Thank you so much, Declan. We've got lots of tips and tools, and Declan's provided us with links to the YMCA and other spaces. I've checked out a couple of their online classes myself, and they're really, really good. Some of them high intensity, some of them not so much. And again, they are in the chat function right now. Declan, thank you so much. I mean, I do just have just one question, just to pick up on what you were saying. Many of us can't leave, some of us can't leave the house because of self-isolation or shielding, but also in spite of that, some of us are really unable to do any kind of physical activity because of other long-term conditions. So I love the fact that you said, you know, maybe do lunges when you're picking something out of the cupboard. Can you maybe just give us maybe just one or two quick tips or tools for people who any kind of physical activity is more stressful and straining, and they may feel, actually, I can't do any of this? Any simple things you might suggest?
So so are you asking if someone's quite debilitated and can't do very much, is it?
Yeah, yes, yeah, exactly. As I said before, we all have varying levels of fitness, and some people may not be able to do any, but is there anything else you can suggest before we move on to Andre, who's going to talk about emotional well-being, that one might be able to do?
I would say there are some chair-based sessions online. I did some chair-based online sessions just using some cans of beans. But even if they don't have to use any kind of weights or any kind of resistance. They can just do some gentle stretching seated, sitting down, and they can also do the stretches in bed. I think, you know, even if you can just keep moving, even in the smallest way, and as I said before, even if you just break up that 30 minutes a day into, say, a 10-minute or a 5-minute and a 10-minute, so that you're not doing, if 30 minutes is too much for someone for any reason, then just do 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, and break it up.
Thank you so much for that. Just before we move on to Andre, but there was a mention there when you were talking about underlying conditions and shielding. Dominic, would you mind popping into the comments the NHS guidelines and BEVA guidelines that Jim has provided around shielding, because we're aware that there has been some confusion, particularly around underlying conditions in people living with HIV. So we want you to all have the right information on that. All right, so now we're going to move over to Andre, who is a counsellor and therapist from Positive East. Andre, over to you.
Oh, I'm unmuted. Okay, good. Thank you. Just like to reiterate what the other two speakers said, thank you for inviting me here today. I think it's a very worthwhile gathering and exercise. And I guess I want to say that, you know, adapting to this kind of overnight change in our lives, to our routines, and for some of us, to our very livelihoods, can be really deeply unsettling, as we all try to understand and make sense of a situation that appears sometimes to be changing by the hour. And I think any situation that affects us but remains largely out of our control is one of those common triggers that can, it can trigger extreme anxiety, it can trigger depression. We can feel almost as if we're like backed into a corner with no way out. So, and I think left unchecked, an overload of stress and anxiety will negatively affect our physical health. It will drain our energy reserves, and it will trigger and can trigger the mind into a sort of compulsion of thought processes that tend to focus on worst case scenarios. As I said, I was doing lying in bed at night, you know, in the early days of this, thinking about the worst sort of things that could happen. So staying grounded and remaining clear-headed in these uncharted times is going to be a challenge for us all. There's absolutely no doubt about that. So yes, in the midst of managing a situation like this COVID-19 outbreak, it's easy to feel overwhelmed and worried. Focusing on how to slow the spread of the virus is important for our physical health. However, identifying ways to manage our mental and emotional health is also crucial in helping us to respond to those increased feelings of anxiety, a sense of perhaps powerlessness, a feeling impatient, feeling irritable, frustration. We might even experience a sense of scarcity or be concerned about increased stigmatization or xenophobia. We may feel uncertainty about the future, or just worrying about this impact of isolation and how it's affecting schedules and social plans. So while feeling worried and is normal and expected for all of us, there are still ways that we can increase and build our emotional and mental resilience. And some of the suggestions I'm going to share with you now, they're not just from me. These are actually brilliant ideas that have come from the clients I work with in a counselling capacity. They've been telling me about what they've been doing, how they've adapted, and things and actions they've been taking that have had a significant effect on stress and on anxiety and on that feeling of overwhelm and uncertainty. So in no particular order, but these I think are just all very valid points. First one, I think we've all heard it, but it's really, really important, is to really make sure you take regular breaks away from all this news. There's a sort of, we're saturated, you know, hour by hour with updates and the latest. And the news tends to be, although it may be factual, it's sensationalism. And at a certain point, it can be more upsetting than informational. So A, make sure that the information you do get is from reputable and non-sensationalist sources, but also just work out, evaluate how much is helpful for you to watch or to read in a given day, and try and stick to that limit. You know, it can be very upsetting to just, you know, the news is on this sort of loop, you know, the latest, the worst, and it stirs up the worst generally of our situation. Despite all the amazing stories I talked about before, they seem to focus on the worst. So, you know, just be mindful of how much we expose ourselves to. And in replacement of what you might have watched as news, just try some other activities that you enjoy to get a sense of normalcy back to your life as much as possible. Making time to unwind, and remind yourself also that the strong feelings that we might all be feeling on one level or another, they are going to fade. They might be strong and intense right now, but they will dissipate over time and as we move through this. I was going to say take care of your body, but I mean, Declan has already spoken well about that. But what I want to say is, if we're taking care of our body, you know, we need to take care of our minds as well. You know, we'd take care of a new car, we'd take care of a favorite item of clothing, we'd take care of some new purchase, you know, make sure we keep it wonderful and clean. So just to put in people's minds the idea, you know, that we must now, this is a time to recruit our minds to be a good employee to us, as opposed to us being a slave to our minds, which is often the case. We get so caught up in its concerns, its worries, its anxieties. So, you know, and the mind is a wonderful instrument. It's not just there to worry, you know, it's there, it's a brilliant instrument of communication. So just reframing the way and thinking about how we use our minds, and just looking into the mind. What is it telling us? You know, what stories is it creating? What stories are we telling ourselves about ourselves in the light of this situation in our lives generally? So yeah, taking care of your body, but also taking care of your mind. If you take care of your mind, that's going to impact on our emotions as well. There's a chicken and egg argument. What comes first? Is it the thought that triggers the feeling, or is it a dodgy feeling of stress and anxiety that triggers the mind? But either way, this holy trinity, I think, of mind and body and spirit or well-being, they're sort of interconnected. So I think some of the things that myself and Maurits and Declan are talking about, they're going to sort of bleed through, because whatever advice we take, hopefully they're all going to lead back to a semblance of sort of balance and get feeling of normalcy in uncertain times. Also want to say, plan for and think about ways of adapting to the drop in social contact. Suddenly we haven't got meetups, we haven't got classes, we haven't got events to go to, we haven't got appointments, outings, visiting, all those sorts of things that have been cancelled that we were doing in the physical world out there. They're not available for us. And the irony, of course, is that in times of crisis, many people naturally seek out connection and comfort from others. So it's important to find creative ways to maintain those connections, check in with your people, call a family member, a friend or a co-worker, send a text message, a direct messenger, use email, use FaceTime, other video formats, Skype, whatever it is you have available. Really make sure to communicate and do not be on your own, because it's not good to be on our, especially if we're on our own, we're not sharing our living space with others who we can talk about our concerns with. So, and there's a glut of support out there as well. I think people will see from all the links, you know, there's so many organizations, charities like Positivists, like Terrence Higgins, like the Metro Charity, like the George House Trust. There's so many organizations, charities that are offering help and support mentally, emotionally, financially, socially. You know, there are there's a whole new world of exercise, online exercise. So many things have sprung up. So we don't need, if we're feeling like we're just sort of cut off, find a way to communicate. If you don't have anyone around you can reach out to, as I said, there are lots of organizations you can link into for that support. We can also find some comfort in remembering we're not alone in this, and that we're all in this together. And something that I do with some of my clients that they find really helpful is to reframe this coronavirus outbreak by using a tactic which we call temporal distancing. Sounds very grown up. What it really is just focusing your attention on a longer time scale. So for instance, imagine how you might look back on these events in a year or even in a few years from now. And this kind of perspective broadening technique, it can really help to sort of relieve and minimize those anxiety-based thoughts and emotions. So, and just try putting this whole thing in a historical context as well. You know, we've experienced not this, but other very difficult times, and we get through them. So, you know, just thinking about this in a different way can maybe help you. Keep things as consistent as possible. Maurits spoke very eloquently about routine, and I won't say much about that because I think he said as much as you can, but you know, do stick to the usual times you get up. Make sure you get up, make sure to get dressed. It might be tempting to think, what's the point of getting dressed? No one's going to see me. But you know, research shows that when we get dressed, it puts us in a different frame of mind. We feel better, we act better, we say different things. So, you know, even if we have to sort of scrape ourselves off the bed, do it, you know. And some people say to me, for instance, you know, I get what you're saying, Andre, but I'm just not motivated. I'm waiting for some motivation. And to maybe think about flipping that. So when I wake up in the morning and every bone in my body says half an hour more, and some other voice says you should be going to the gym, you know, sometimes we have to go into action to then be, the action motivates us. I get up, I go to the gym, and then after I leave the gym, I feel ready. I skip out of there like a gazelle, ready for the day, and I'm motivated. So don't wait for something to happen, even if you have to force yourself into action, because you'll find that will then motivate you. Yeah. Like I said, write out, you can do a worry drop. You know, if you're really worried, write down all your immediate fears and anxieties on a scrap of paper in a journal and keep writing, because you will find that bit by bit, your anxiety levels will begin to drop. So that's a really helpful thing to do. And just use this time for activities. Activity doesn't have to be watching Joe Wicks every day. It can be cleaning out cupboards. We've all got drawers full of stuff, you know. We can read books, we can learn to cook. There is we can join classes online, we can connect with communities. So lots and lots of things we could do, but meditate. I'll end on saying really, really think about, if you can, meditating. It doesn't mean sitting on a cloud cross-legged and you know, getting to a place called nirvana. It just means slowing down, checking into your breathing, and if you're breathing, you can't think at the same time. So choose your breath and just step back from all that mental activity, drop into some peace and some stillness, which will boost your mental and emotional well-being. Have I run out of time?
You're just on time, which is
okay.
brilliant.
I'll stop there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Dominic, do you have any questions coming in for Andre, or?
Not at the moment, no. So
okay, we're almost up to time as well, because it's almost 4 o'clock. I mean, I just want to say thank you, Andre, particularly for that. I love the temporal idea as well, and I think we could all try that. I think Maurits spoke a little bit about how we view this and the perspective we take. I've certainly been spending some time reflecting on different periods of my life and how COVID and the lockdown might have impacted me on different times. And in some ways that makes me look at the present and feel quite grateful that I am where I am in this present moment right now to manage it. And maybe for some of us looking around at our own situations, we can do that as well. And certainly issues around mindfulness and thinking differently are really, really important. So I'd like to thank all three of our speakers for providing such great information. We have had somebody come back. I'm just going to read this out. Some feedback on the amount of activity. Some of us have more time available. I'm lucky enough to be close to the countryside and get out on my push bike. And I think, thank you for sharing that. And I think that, as I said earlier when we opened up, we are all in different situations and managing this differently. So some of us have the luxury and privileges. Others have to accommodate and acclimatise to where we are. So thank you for that. Jim, back to you.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so as we sort of come to the end, I thought it might be good just to let everyone know about some of the other services that are available and sort of types of support if you need it. So at the Terrence Higgins Trust, we have some online counselling and emotional support on offer. So all of our counselling and emotional support is now online. It's been streamlined into a new online service. So we have a new suite of services which we've put together for for lockdown, which is THT at home, and you can go and see that on the website. So we've got online counselling, we've got a variety of sort of peer support groups, peer learning sessions like this, which we're doing with Prepster. And we have our peer support digital platform, which is My HIV as well. And of course, we have THT Direct, which is our helpline, which is open Monday to Friday as well. So if you need, particularly if you've got any concerns, I know we've had lots of people that have been concerned about the issue around shielding, and we've seen a comment earlier in this session around that. There's some really good guidance on the Beaver website, but there's also some guidance around this on the THT website as well. So if you've got any concerns around, if you've been asked to shield, whether you feel you should be shielding, have a look at the guidance around that. Yeah, I think, Mark, you were going to just talk a little bit about Prepster.
So Prepster have also created a hub with COVID-19 information. And if you visit prepster.info/COVID-19, /COVID, the link is now in there. We've got lots of really useful information which is written by us and for us on a number of different issues which you might find useful. And in addition, as Jim has said, we'll be doing more of these webinars in the next 2 weeks. Just to add in, if you would like the list of resources and links that we have put out today, please email me, Mark, so it's addressed to me, Mark, and the email address is in the links now. It's hello@prepster.info, and I will send that to you individually.
So Mark, what, as we come to the end of this session, what would you say is the impact of COVID-19 on you?
Thanks, Jim. I mean, I've, like other people have said, it's really given me an opportunity to re-examine my routine and how I work. My physical activity has actually increased because I tried to implement that straight away. But it also has left me feeling a bit sad and a little bit isolated sometimes, because I do miss seeing friends and family. I'm really, really sociable. But I'm also accept that I live in a very privileged place where I have my own space. I have a garden. I'm able to engage with friends. So I'm trying to be a bit more optimistic and to take on board a lot of the things at the point said. But I am also pondering some of life's bigger questions, like who are we and why are we here and why do we do this, which is no bad thing. And what about you, Jim?
Well, you know, I think it's probably given me a bit of a new outlook on work. Actually, I never used to think I never used to particularly enjoy working at home. It wasn't something I like to do, but I really am quite getting into this working from home thing. Actually, it's been good. I mean, I kind of miss people, but I'm a lot less distracted, and actually, I think it's quite nice to have a bit more choice around kind of who I actually want to engage with at work, rather than having to see everyone all the time. And that's quite nice. And I'm getting to work more with you, Mark, which of course is, an absolute joy.
Always a joy. Okay, thank you. Okay, so everybody, we are now at 4 o'clock, and we'd like to thank our speakers for taking the time out of their day to contribute and to give us their insights, tips and tools. We really, really appreciate you. I want to thank Dominic for being our moderator and fielding comments and questions and putting all that useful information. And to all of you for joining us today. We really hope that you will join us again next week, Thursday, when I said we'll be looking at staying safe. So domestic abuse, unsafe situations, unsafe circumstances, and housing issues. So again, we'll be here at 3. We'll be sending out the link to log on to Zoom tomorrow. So look at our social media at THC and Prepsterk, where we'll be putting all that information out. On behalf of Prepster and Terrence Higgins Trust, we want to say a huge thank you for your support and for engaging with us today. We wish you well. Please stay safe. Please look after yourself, your emotional and your physical well-being. And again, there's lots of links there if you need support and information in between times. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we will also be posting this on our website at a later date, hopefully as soon as possible. Thank you all very much.